Yeah, hey, uh, come on. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. What? Yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah, hey. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour. We working on building the whole them in power. The signs in the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man. I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big bang, man. Need to go yard. Living high fashion in the last days. I don't give a damn, man. Let him eat cake. I don't give a damn what a hater gon' say. Hard to see an asshole got a fool getting paid. Getting revenue every time, make a wave. Red up like the water, cause we making these waves. Red up like the water with a gang like slaughter. Millie on my mind, live, I be round high. Laughing to the bait while I'm stacking all these dollars. Getting real high while I'm blowing on this lullaby. Putting numbers on the board like it was a aha. Praying to the pancake like it was a aha. Got the studio doing numbers like a trap house. In the backwoods, bending corners with the strap out. Hitting new levels will come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour. We working on building a whole damn empire. The signs and the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man. I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car.
All right, what's up? So the next book that I want to do today is Ancient Gods, Lost Histories, Hidden Truths, and the Conspiracy of Silence. This is one of the books that I've read. I got it right here. I actually got to have a podcast discussion with this individual, Jim Willis. Jim Willis is his name. He passed away a few years ago, I believe. And it was a pretty good, interesting podcast discussion with him. It was actually one of the first ones that I had a podcast with. I had read his book, and I was like, I just want to ask him some questions. And I asked him for a podcast interview, and I sent him like 10 questions, and we went from there. So just like always, every book that I have has all these tabs. It's just my way of saying, hey, this is what I've read. This is what I understand. This is what I need to research more. This is what I'm confused on. I mean, it's just anything that's just interesting to me. And I'll probably go over most of these. A lot of these are probably just like things that I needed to verify for myself, or just it's all kinds of different reasons why I have these tabs. I get them in bulk from Amazon, and instead of highlighting and underlining stuff in there, I mean, then that means you have to go to the page and look for it. This way I could just be like, okay, it's one of these tabs right here that I know that I read this from, or what book I read. Because what I like to do is I just like to share exactly what book I've read and where I got my information from, and that's it. I don't try to do anything past that, and I don't try to go anything away from what that person says. I just read what is exactly interesting to me. And he talks, like, one of the first tabs, he talks about Spider Woman. Okay, that's what he says. He says Spider Woman have formed it for them, and throughout the earth that echoed in the similar centers within their own bodies and sang in resonance with the music of the stars in the heavens. The purpose of these centers was to help keep the people in tune with the Creator as they followed his ways. So I'm 100% sure that and this is for the first world, Tokpela. That's what the subtitle is. And I can just say that because they said, the Creator as they followed his ways. So I'm thinking like God or something like that. Like there's one like almost like what is it, henotheism, where there's other gods but you only worship one, something like that. Yeah, so he talks about, that was one of the first tabs that I tabbed up, and I just thought that was interesting. And actually, that's before the introduction. So, um, okay, so the next tab that I found interesting, and this is actually in the introduction. It says, "Don't treat this too lightly. It's familiar. It's a familiar tale. The early texts about Jesus of Nazareth, for instance, don't mention anything about a virgin birth or raising the dead. All that comes years later. He wasn't declared to equal with God until the Council of Nicaea, more than 300 years after his birth." So, I can say, from my research, just saying, what people typically believe about God or Jesus dying on the cross. There's actually a location in Japan, I can't remember the name of it, where they believe Jesus got away and lived with his wife and family there. And that's pretty interesting to me because not all texts say that. You know, that it was also a virgin birth, and I went over that with a Gnostic from the Gnostic Union, Bishop Nathan. He talks a lot about that. You could just check out any of those Gnostic videos with him. He talks about it a lot. And raising the dead. There's different text that says different things. I just, from what I've learned, is that there's just one go-to source, I guess you could say, which is pretty interesting because not that source doesn't always mean that it's right. All right, this next tab I have on him, he says it's under the common theories subtitle. Until relatively recently, and by that I mean the last few hundred years or so, questions about origins were handled, at least in European American circles, by religious folks who declared that we are the product of divine fiat, God beliefs, but described their particular divinity. Oh, I'm sorry. God said, God said, and it was so. Many indigenous cultures around the world held similar beliefs that describe their particular divinity and the nature of his, her, its modus operandi in different terms than Judeo-Christian theologians. Yeah, so and then even talk, and this is actually interesting because I have read all of Darwin's books, and I'll be going over those in the future. But he says that even ever since Darwin, however, the prevailing and constantly developing answers from the world of traditional anthropology and DNA research held forth that modern humans, Homo sapiens, descended from an African woman now appropriately nicknamed Eve, who gave birth to the species some 200,000 years ago, probably in Ethiopia. But new discoveries are now being published that add fresh information and seem to push back the date of our birth with disturbing frequency. So yeah, that's true. What I found this very, very honest with that is that Darwin, reading Darwin's books, he did everything he could do at his time. He was boots on ground type of person. I mean, he was visualizing this stuff with his own eyes. He wasn't looking at, YouTube videos or watching, somebody from somewhere else. He was in the jungles. He was in these indigenous tribes. He was in these areas and he was taking notes. He was living there. He had to adapt to so many different surroundings, cultures, and food, and all kinds of different things. So he was boots on ground. So he recorded things based on what he seen. He would see, he was always looking at, matter of fact, I learned more about birds in reading his books than I learned about the human species, because he talks a lot about birds. It's very it's not too much he doesn't really talk too much about human evolution or anything like that to me. I mean, he talks about it, but that's not like his point. I mean, he does have a book that's specifically supposed to be about that, but I mean, he still talks about birds, so that's why I say birds are very interesting. But Darwin did what he did at that time based on what he had. I'm saying? He didn't have the technology we had now. You got to remember, this is hundreds of years ago. So you got to give this man some kind of kind of credit, right? Like he started it, without him, would we be even talking about this stuff today about, how human evolution ain't real and this and that, and everybody has their own conspiracy theories about humans and where they came from. But even him saying 200,000 years ago, that's pretty interesting because um just recently they had a update on a peer-reviewed article that now, for the one that they found in Ethiopia, the 200,000 year bone that most people go off of, or bones I should say, actually goes back to like 200 plus thousand. Like I think it's like 30,000 or 50,000. I can't remember which one, so I wanted to say 30,000 because I remember I want to say it was either 30 or 50,000. So 230, 250,000 years ago. So they actually, you know the numbers got bigger. But I know from I believe it was in January 12th, if I'm not mistaken, there was an article that came out, and there's peer-reviewed articles on it and all this other stuff. And they talked about the oldest Homo sapien bones was 300,000 years, so that's good. And shout out to Kalani, yo, he got a good presentation coming up on these uh pews that we went to see in Savannah, Georgia. He's a one of the, I'm gonna say, best people I would ever go to for anything that has to do with religion. Like he has it on lock. Like I love his library. I took a screenshot of his library one time so that way I can sit there and pick some of the books that he has. So shout out to him. But yeah, I think it's going to change every day too. And the only reason why I say that is because everybody talks about the simple idea that, all right, they go like, okay, well, the first question is what makes somebody a human? We know what anatomically a human will look like. We know what the idea of talking and walking and this, that, and the third, but not everybody has those opportunities. So are they fully human, or are they just mixed? And that's where everybody has their own arguments. But I mean, for me personally, I'm still trying to figure out what does make us so much different. Like, what's the spark in us that gives us the ability to create these technologies in this world around us. We use tools to our advantage. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But I'm gonna say, for me personally, I think, as far as we know, I think humans will go back millions of years. And I can actually say I had another discussion with Michael Cramo, who wrote that book. I believe it was Forbidden Archaeology. I had a discussion with him. And I think in that book, in Forbidden Archaeology, and I think I'll be going over that book too, he talks a lot about footprints too. So, and he considers that in so many ways a type of human. I asked him a few times what makes somebody a human based on new information, and he gives a pretty in-depth idea of what he thinks a human is. I use that word anatomically because of the simple fact that that's what he embedded in my head if you read that book. So the next tab is I can never say this name right, but it's in 1853, Hormazd Rassam discovered fragments of ancient Sumerian text, which is now considered to be the first great work of literature our civilization ever produced. After its translation, it was published in 1870 by George Smith. Although known by serious Mesopotamian scholars far and wide, it was generally consigned to oblivion to the popular press. As a matter of fact, it took an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation to really spark any really real public interest in the work. When in the 5th season of the popular show, the 2nd episode, titled Dormock, called the Patrick Stewart's character, to quote the lines, he who was my companion through adventure and hardship is gone forever. People all over the world rushed to read the Epic of Gilgamesh to learn more about the heroes Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, and Enkidu, a wild man who was created by the gods. So I can say I don't know about the Star Trek thing because I ain't really watched that, but I could say it's interesting to me that people don't understand that there's different versions of the story of Gilgamesh, and I always said this, and I did it when I did the book. I always get George Smith and Andrew George mixed up. So Andrew George, so he talks about George Smith here, but Andrew George also has a translation, and he calls it a new translation. And there's a couple of other people that have their translations. But what I've learned from all of them is that a lot of times they're using their own, I guess, technique to give out what they believe, what the text say. And I already went over one of the books, so that's on there. Then here, this is another tab, and this one's a good tab. But did Anunnaki come from outer space, or were they humans survivors of a great cataclysm that destroyed their civilization here on Earth, as is claimed by scholars such as Andrew Collins, who traces them to ancestral Solatrans, very earthbound human culture who survived the great catalysm of the Younger Dryas event. So this is interesting to me because I already said that, and it's funny he didn't mention it anywhere in that paragraph. Zachariah Sitchin, he does talk about chariots of the gods before that. He in the now on Enter the Aliens, that section, because this is further into that subtitle, Into the Aliens. In the beginning, he does have a picture of Zachariah Sitchin, who is Russian born, uh, and he's the one that came up with the idea that they came from planet Nibiru. I can tell you, reading most of the text, and I'm going to do another live show on this. I already talked about this a little bit in the past, but I'm going to do another live show on this, that where the Anunnaki actually came from. Now, when you look at the text, it actually gives gears towards them coming from the depths of the seas. A good example of that is the Abzu or Apsu. Some people say it differently. Some people use the SU, some people use the ZU. You know, so yeah, I can say that the how can I say that the Inky, he's known as a fish god, or he has water coming out his shoulders, and then you got the idea that he comes from the depths of the waters to give humans some kind of information or knowledge to carry the human race further along. It's just interesting because Nibiru is also, we know for a fact 100% that it was a Mesopotamian city, but for some odd reason more people believe it was a planet. Now I get why they believe it's another planet, because they want to believe in aliens and they want to believe in something outside of Earth's atmosphere. Now that's fine. I mean, you can believe in anything that you want, that's fine, but the facts show that the Anunnaki didn't come from a planet Nibiru that orbited our sun every 3,600 years. When you take that idea out of the equation, and just listen to what the actual text say, or read what the actual text say, I should say, um, you can't deny it. Now, if there was something that gears to having life outside of planet Earth, and there are aliens on a different planet, yeah, I mean, possibly that's something that could happen and be true. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that just because we need to lump the Anunnaki up in there. So that and I know most of the credit goes to that cylinder seal VA 243. So at least that's what Zachariah Sitchin used to always pull out. So he talks about the Paracas people of Peru lived in the area now made famous by the Nazca lines. They were the first, as a matter of fact, to carve lines into the Nazca Plateau. For 1,000 years, they plied their trade in this hot, dry climate until they were defeated by vigorous Nazca people who absorbed their culture and customs. Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting to me, because the Nazca lines are a mystery. Nobody really understands why they're there in the first place. Nobody understands it, what's the you know what they did in the first place. So the next and these I just looked at this. It's not a lot of tabs, but yeah, this book was actually a really good book. This is actually a good beginner's book to get all like what all the mysteries are out there talking about and seeing because I don't remember him saying, "Hey, well, this is what the facts are." He just says, "Hey, this is what people are saying about this, that, and the third," and that's why it's conspiracy of silence, hidden truths, lost histories. The next tab is Homo aquaticus. My thesis, okay, and this is a thesis from Sir Alistair Clavering Hardy in New Science, March 17, 1960. Okay, yeah. I wanted to make sure I read who this was coming from. Okay, so Homo aquaticus. My thesis is that a branch of primitive ape stock was forced by competition from life in the trees to feed on the seashores and to hunt for food, shellfish, sea urchins, etc. In the shallow waters off the coast, I suppose they were forced into the water just as we have seen happen in so many other groups of terrestrial animals. I am imagining this happening in the warmer parts of the world in the tropical seas where man could stand being in the water for relatively long periods, that is, several hours at a stretch. So that's pretty interesting. So that's a Homo aquaticus. That's another, I guess, species that would be interesting to look into. The next tab is these and many other questions caused him to wonder if humans had entertained in an aquatic interval sometime in their evolutionary past. Whales and dolphins were land creatures before they returned to the sea. Westenhofer asks if a similar thing could have happened to us. Primitive surviving features from an aquatic phase, he wrote in his paper, are preserved in man's anatomy today. The postulate of an aquatic mode of life during an early stage of human evolution is a tenable hypothesis for which whether further inquiry may produce additional supporting evidence. That's pretty interesting to me. Really interesting. Hold on for a second. I say that's interesting because where it says um, whales and dolphins were land creatures before they returned to the sea. Yo, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT that. I want to see. I want to see what it says because I never heard that before. But let's see what it said. Oh, hold on, let me get rid of this. That's why they probably said they find whale bones or some type of whale skeletons on land that isn't supposed to be there unless it was either flooded or that idea. Were whales and dolphins once land creatures? Let's see what ChatGPT says. Oh shoot! Yes. All right. So that's actually pretty interesting. I learned something new. Just hold on. Let me bring this up. See, I don't think I'm lying. Yep. See, short answer, yes. Whales and dolphins absolutely used to be land animals, and the story is wild in the best way. Let me break it down and clean and clear. Yes, whales and dolphins were once four-legged land mammals. Every modern whale, dolphin, and porpoise belongs to the order of Cetacea, and their ancestors were not fish, not sea reptilian reptiles, but hoofed land mammals related to modern hippos. Holy shoot, that's crazy. Then it gives you the time frame, right? Looks so this simplified but accurate. But let's see. DNA genetic studies show whales are most closely related to hippos, which descend from the same family of hoofed land mammals. Whales still carry And this is all the stuff right here. Why did they go back to the water? So probably for the same reason humans love the beach. Food safety and less competition. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right, yeah, that's pretty cool. So um I didn't know that. So I learned something that some of y'all probably are like, yeah, I already knew that, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that I didn't know that that's actually interesting. All right, so let's move on to the next one. The hypothesis hits the airways. It's possible though that even Morgan's the aquatic ape hypothesis might not have achieved the success it did were the theory not taken up by none other than television's The Animal Planet Network, Mermaid, The Body Found 2012, and Mermaids, The New Evidence 2013. These shows, the Harry Potter and Little Mermaid movies probably didn't hurt either. Not only postulated a branch of human ancestry originating from the sea, but went on to offer alleged visual proof that remnants of the early species stayed in the sea and never returned. Although the network has since described these episodes are entertaining but fake documentaries, they still run from time to time, along with their conspiracy claims that government officials associated with the U.S. Navy know about it but are covering up the evidence for reason known only to them, probably having to do with the fact that their sonar scans enacted for public safety are reaping havoc upon an unknown species. That's interesting to me because uh well, Anna says that's true, they were like giant crocodiles many 100,000 years ago. They say that due to them being on both land and water. That's why they talk about, the ancient Egyptian crocodiles sometimes. I've heard that about the ancient Egyptian crocodiles in the mythologies on why some of their people believe their gods were like crocodiles. And that's interesting because it goes back to this that with the mermaids, the first mermaids that some people will say or give argument to be being depicted are the ones in Mesopotamia, like Enki being what's that one god? Dagon. I think that's his name. I can't remember his name. Uh, Oannes. Yeah. No, they got like the half fish body and half human body, and I mean people depict them as mermaids, but it's interesting because like I said, when you look at the Anuna/Anunnaki in the Mesopotamian area, their gods came from the depths of the seas. I mean literally the Apsu, the Enki. I mean these is Oannes, that these are individuals that came from the depths of the sea, and this is no argument. This is like big over there. I don't know where they get this whole thing where they come from planet Nibiru. That really just blows my mind because matter of fact, Cylinder Seal VA 243 has more to do with German than it does with the planet Nibiru, because the inscriptions, and I went over this in past episodes, the inscriptions on the right and the left, and then on the bottom one on the right side also, and it has more to do with German than it does with Planet Nibiru. At least that's the argument that Dr. Michael S. Heiser gives. And I can tell you right now, I don't agree with Dr. Michael S. Heiser's idea about how the sun was depicted at that time frame. I think everybody depicts the sun differently. I just think when you are at a school environment, everybody's just going to do it one way, and anybody that does it any other way is just, uh, somebody not to be trustworthy. But I mean, that could be for anything, right? So the next tab, let's see. This book is interesting. I'm telling you, it gives you the basics of all these mythologies. I'm just picking the ones. I'm just picking the ones that I found interesting. There we go. All right, so it says most of our clocks are built around the perceived course of the sun each day. Hebrew, Muslim, and the Phoenician cultures say that the day starts at sunset. Taoist and Gregorian clocks are key into midnight. By that, we mean that 12 a.m. is the beginning of a new day. Hence, Americans following a Gregorian calendar stay up until midnight to celebrate the new year. If we were to follow a Hindu, Babylonian, or an Egyptian system, we would get up at dawn to do the same thing because their day starts at sunrise. So, yeah, see, different cultures just have different things. And this is just mostly about the calendar, so I'll read the next little paragraph that's under it. It says, but let's stick to the Gregorian calendar most of us use, named after Pope Gregory the 13th, who authorized it back in 1582. It divides the year into 365 days, but because time doesn't take orders even from a pope, we have to add a day every 4 years in order to keep things in sync between our wobble and the sun's relative position. We call it a leap year. So yeah, it just gives um, a little brief thing about our history and time and stuff like that. Let's see. So this is what actually is always interesting to me. It says, when you understand the story in these terms, it makes perfect sense. History, after all, is written by the victors. In this case, it was written by the Christian church, which had a vested part in the pun, in parentheses, interest in putting to rest the old dragon religions that pointed to the stars rather than heaven and derived its strength from Mother Earth instead of the sun. Or rather, sun, again, pardon the pun, the time of the dragon was dead. Long live the new age. And then he goes on to say this didn't happen only in the West. In China, the supreme god of this time was Taiyin. His totem was the great bear. In Japan, where the Ainu people believed they were descended from the original inhabitants of the land, the bear was worshipped before all gods. And it just goes on to talk about more different places. But it is true. Most of the stories, um, it's who it's coming from, who was the best to actually promote their work. That's why and I say promote their work because that's why there's a lot of people that will in so many ways honestly just say that they you know this is how we're going to calculate time, or this is what the stories are going to be. This is going to be our God, you know, and make everybody believe that. And boom, now you got a whole belief system from that. Yep, and there was 360 days in a year. Yeah, there was the calendar changed depending on the location, the civilization, how they took time, where and what they used as a time stamp, basically. Uh, I always found it interesting because um, who's it had to take some years for them to say, okay, now we're going to change this from BC to AD. We've been wanting to do this for the last 10 years, but we can't do it. So, or we've been wanting to do it for the last 100 years, we just couldn't get to an agreement. And then when we finally got in power, we just made it a change on our own. So that could have happened too. Another tab is, so two groups developed. One group took the 2475 BCE date as gospel. The other jumped on the board of 10,450 BC, ancient civilization bandwagon. And that's where things stood for a while until more information threw another monkey wrench into the works. And this is okay, so this is the paragraph before. So that was way too back in time to satisfy traditionalists. This was, of course, before the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, which preceded the pyramids by 5,000 years. So no one was ready to say that any human civilization existed way back then that was remotely capable of building such a structure. According to conventional wisdom, it simply couldn't be. Paleolithic humans just couldn't have done it. So That's pretty interesting because that's an argument, and this is under the section Orion and Giza pyramids. So obviously they're talking about how all this stuff was possible at that time frame. But what's interesting to me is that, all right, let's just say they did have iron. Okay, could they have built the pyramids? Yeah, they could have. They could have shaped the. They could have shaped the stone and stuff with iron, right? All right. Now the next question is, how did they move some of these stones? Well, nobody knows how. Maybe, just maybe, and I'm just going to guess any of these possible theories. So um, maybe there was a special group of individuals who said, "Hey, we'll bring this stone to you. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to bring this stone to you." And when they finally got it, in the middle of them building the pyramids, they was like, "Yo, let's put this inside the pyramids." And somebody was like, "Yo, that's a good idea." And they put it. They didn't have to take it that far. Maybe those 80-ton or whatever, how big those stones are, wasn't the initial. Hey, we have to have these in the pyramids. Maybe they finally got that as a gift from somebody, and those and now they're like, "Yo, we'll just use this for the pyramids, yo." Then like, and they'll be like, they was sitting outside forever, and somebody just like, "Yo, I can shine these bad boys up, polish them up," you know what I mean? And we could throw them in the pyramids, and boom, that's how you got them in the pyramids. But I don't know why people don't think like that. They think that, okay, they carried these from here to build the pyramids. Okay, maybe the Egyptians didn't have that ability to do that, right? But maybe a different group of people. So while you're sitting here trying to find the Egyptians doing it and stuff like that, you probably won't find that there. You have to go to the other cultures around the world and be like, "Yo, who could have done this?" Right? Who could? Because think about it. You're not going to have all your specialty in one spot. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has their own specialty. That's what makes a civilization grow in the first place, is that everybody that has their own unique abilities and theories and abilities to do things. So just think of it like this. Okay. Somebody some time ago brought these stones either before or after the pyramids were built or whatnot. They were sitting outside and somebody was like, "Man, what y'all going to do with them stones?" "No, we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to do something with them." He was like, "Well, all right," the Pharaoh was like, "All right, just leave them out there, keep them out of sight, out of mind." You know what I'm saying? And then somebody was like, "Yo, let's build these pyramids." So they started building the pyramids, and it's like, "Yo, what can we put inside there?" It's like, "What about the rocks out there?" And some dude was like, "Yo, y'all pay me this much, I'll shape them up. You know what I'm saying? I'll polish them up for y'all, and y'all can throw them in there." And they came to agreement time frame on when it had to be done. They're gonna be like, "Yo, you're gonna have to move these in there and all that." He's gonna be like, "Don't worry about that. I got you. I can do that." You know what I'm saying? Because every contractor from around the world is probably coming over here to. When I say contractor, I'm thinking like every architect, engineer, intelligent individual from around the world that's building their own cities and stuff like that came to Egypt and was like, "Yo, we gotta watch these dudes how to do this stuff." And somebody was like, and everybody started throwing in there, "Hey, we could do this for you. We could do this for you. We could do this for you." You know what I'm saying? Money was looking good at the time. So they was like, "Okay, we'll exchange and we'll do this, that." And that's how things happen. Not the Egyptians probably didn't know how to do all that. Like they had a different group of people that could build, I don't know, certain type of special rope or some sort, right? That can help pull up, or some type of pulleys that can help pull up, the stones. I mean, anything, right? There could be so many different people that have their their hands in their pot, and you're looking at the person that's throwing all the food in the pot in the first place, right? Like the person that's feeding and all that. So yes, Egypt had these beautiful things and all this, but they probably got help from groups from outside there. You know what I mean? What's up, Alex? What's going on, man? Great author right there. He has a great book. Promote your book up there real quick, and I'll throw it up here on the feed. Oh yeah, the banners don't work again. I keep forgetting that. I gotta check the banners. I forgot they did change. They just recently changed that. But anyway, so we have to find. I mean, we know for a fact that there was a group of sea people, right? Like, and I know the time frame doesn't line up. as far as, when the pyramids were built and this and that. But if there was a sea people before, I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a sea people before that. I mean, even then, the sea people didn't even have a writing system. So we really don't know anything about it. But there could have been just a group of individuals that had their own abilities and techniques and ways of moving these stones. And because you can't find it in the Egyptian writing system, we have to go back to different other cultures that had civilizations around that same time frame. Matter of fact, a lot of people know about the pyramids in Giza, but forget that there are pyramids in Peru right now that a lot of people um, will say, that uh, I forgot what I was going to go with this. Basically, like, I don't know. I forgot what I was going to go with that. So we're just going to go with the next tab. Next tab. Now we return to our original theme, astronomy. More to the point, astrology. Let's assume that the experts are correct when they say the Sphinx was originally a lion in both head and body. Can its position reveal anything about its age? Indeed, it can. The lion on the Giza faces due east every spring equinox, the day when night and day are equal in length. It is positioned to watch the sunrise. But that's interesting to me, because a lot of people say that the Sphinx is something different than it wasn't the same shape that it was now. So that's an argument that a lot of people say and would talk about. And he even talks about Graham Hancock in here, who explains it in his book, Magicians of the Gods, and he has a whole quote from him from that book. So yeah, it's just interesting that a lot of people go back to the Graham Hancock and ask these questions. I mean, I think Graham Hancock is just asking the question: is there an older civilization? I just want to know, and it's so funny right here, because the last page or not the last page, page 96, he talks about this is a section of Graham Hancock by itself. So, but it's just interesting to me, because he just asking the question: is there an older civilization out there? I mean, is there? I mean, let's just be honest. But what is a civilization? Do you think Göbekli Tepe is the oldest place that has a civilization? If that's the case, what does mining gold have to do anything? Because you can find mining gold in different places around the world that's older than Göbekli Tepe in some cases. So what is the idea of a civilization? And I've asked so many people, I mean, so many different people, and everybody has pretty much almost the same idea of what a civilization is, but they add their own little tweaks to it. So some people will say like writing and communication and working together, and then some people will say you don't need writing because everything was being memorized mentally, and that what was it, that the other stuff was just having shelter of any kind. It doesn't have to have anything fancy like a house or a mansion or anything like that. And then the way just to teach children, like education and stuff, like, so everybody had their own idea of what made a civilization. I know the Sumerians are considered the first civilization because of their writing system, which is pictographic script and stuff like that. So Alex says he's working on a video on proto-civilization 1,000 years before the Sumerians here in Europe. Very interesting. And I think I know what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's actually a writing system, I can't remember where, I believe it's somewhere in Europe, that is I want to say it's almost cuneiform like, but not cuneiform like, because it's not on clay tablets. I think it's on stone, and they say it's older than the Sumerians. But it's interesting that he says 1,000 years before the Sumerians, because what's interesting to me is the Ubadians are considered the civilization or the group of people that inhabited the land of Sumer. And this is where you get from most of the artifacts, you get depictions of what would be like a reptilian type depiction, and sometimes like like some type of ghost-like figure either entering or exiting a reptilian-like body. It's like it's the Ubadians are just research the Ubadians. That to me that and yeah, there are civilizations in Europe that are older than the Sumerians. I can't remember the name. I would have to go through one of these books that I have over there because I have a book on European history and stuff like that. And let me see. So he says, yeah, but it's not a writing system, but just some pictograms. If it turned out to be a writing system, it would be called a, yep, it is used. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing. That's where the argument is. That's why I always say, it's important to understand what a writing system is, because, you can find this all around the world. And it confuses people because sometimes people will say that's a writing system, which is not. And that's a great point. From that's actually a really great point. I just don't remember the exact place that it is at. So here we go. This one is under ancient catastrophes. I believe this is another chapter. It doesn't say what number the chapter is. It says near the end of the ice age, 12,800 years ago, a giant comet that had entered the solar system from deep space thousands of years earlier broke into multiple fragments. Some of these struck the Earth, causing a global cataclysm on a scale unseen since the extinction of the dinosaurs. At least 8 of the fragments hit the North American ice cap, while further fragments hit the Northern European ice cap. The impacts from comets fragments a mile wide, approaching at more than 60,000 miles an hour, generated huge amounts of heat, which instantly liquidized millions of square kilometers of ice, destabilizing the Earth's crust and causing the global deluge that is remembered in myths all around the world. It's another great point. Everybody has these ideas about a comet or comets coming out of the sky, hitting Earth, and causing these cataclysm events. So this is what's interesting. It says the next paragraph is, but there were survivors known to later cultures by names such as the sages, the magicians, the shining ones, and the mystery teachers of heaven. They traveled the world in their great ships, doing all in their power to keep the spark of civilization burning. They settled at key locations: Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Baalbek in Lebanon, Giza in Egypt, ancient Sumer, Mexico, Peru, and across the Pacific, where a huge pyramid has recently been discovered in Indonesia. Everywhere they went, these magicians of the gods brought with them the memory of a time when mankind had fallen out of harmony with the universe and paid a heavy price. Now, this comes from, where does this come from? Okay, this is, because it says Graham Hancock underneath, so I'm thinking this all came from Graham Hancock stuff. Because on the next page, it goes into, on the bottom, it says Graham Hancock introducing magicians of the gods. Yeah, I think that is a quote from Graham Hancock. So, I mean, I'm not even going to argue that. I mean, something happened back then. Nobody really knows. So we going back and forth about it. The question is could there have been an older civilization? And could have the older civilization, what technology that they had that was so advanced? That's the next question. All right, so says Plato, some 2,400 years ago, there lived in Greece one of the most profound thinkers the world has ever known. Plato was a philosopher and mathematician whose famous teacher was Socrates and whose most famous student was Aristotle. Pythagoras influenced him as well. He was the founder of the Academy of Athens, the first great university in the Western world. His work, still studied today, is considered to be the foundation of Western philosophy and science. Alfred North Whitehead once offered the now famous opinion that all Western philosophy is merely footnotes to Plato, because Augustine of Hippo, a major figure who shaped Christian systematic, the theology, had such a reverence for Plato. Friedrich Nietzsche once called Christianity Platonism for the people. Now, I can tell you, Plato was a big person. Everybody knows that. But I'm taking a class from a Chinese university in Beijing right now, and oh yeah, that's interesting. And that taking that class, they talk a lot about Plato. Yeah, Ubadians are thought to be a part of Sumerians. Yeah, that's actually true. That's why I say a lot of people, they say the Sumerians 3200 BC, but some people will give the time frame which goes into the Ubadian time frame, and they'll say that's actually the Sumerians, and they don't talk about Ubadians. So yeah, that's actually a great point. That's why I always say, when is the separation of times of this stuff happens? When did they become the Sumerians? And then when did the Sumerians start to become the Akkadians? And then when the Acadians and then so on became this and that, and it just the line just go down. He said he'll watch it later. Man, appreciate it, bro. See, I'll talk to you later, man. Um, but yeah, I'm taking this class from China, and it's pretty interesting because they talk a lot about Plato, a lot of stuff that I've already known just because of I've read all the books that are available to the general public about Plato, multiple different versions of Timaeus and Critias, just to get my eyes and ideas about what other people believe is said. But another thing that's interesting is talks about in this book about Plato, says, according to Plato, this information came from a distant relative of his name, Solon, who had traveled and studied in Egypt, where he was taught the tradition that had been passed down for 9,000 years. Never has so little been written that generated so much discussion, book, thesis, hyperbole, exaggeration, flights of fancy, and accusations. If Plato had written nothing else but these few pages, he would still be immortalized by many arguments that follow concerning the long lost island of Atlantis. So yeah, the idea of Atlantis is a big thing for a lot of people. The next tab I found on here, okay, it's about Lemuria. It says, what does all this have to do with Lemuria and Mu ruins? Just things. Just this. If you ever are at a party of traditional archaeologists, for heaven's sake, don't mention the word Lemuria. And if you are a grad student looking for a dissertation topic, don't even consider looking for the lost continent of Mu. Either one will get you kicked out of the club so fast you won't even hear the door being closed behind you. It would be like going up to Billy Graham and asking him what his astrological sign is. It just isn't done. Of all the theories concerning lost civilizations and ancient humans, these two are the most loaded with portent. Lemuria and Mu exist way out there on the fringe to the left of everything, including Atlantis. Even some popular fringers don't want to be identified with them. You will find the terms conveniently missing from the indexes of their popular books. They are terms loaded with dynamite and dangerous to use in public. So yeah, that's why there's a lot of people don't like Graham Hancock, because he talks about some of this stuff. In reality, people don't like to hear the idea of Atlantis, or they don't like hearing Lemuria or Mu or anything. They're like, that doesn't exist, blah, 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 blah. And they look at you crazy, but, those same people will go to whatever religious belief, that system that they have, their place of worship, they will go there and believe some of the stuff that's in there. Right. And that's crazy to me, because if you're questioning in that and you're a religious person and you believe in God, I mean, and if God didn't want you to know what happened, why would he tell you? Right. we always found out by going against what God wanted, right? Like that's why Adam and Eve got kicked out the Garden of Eden. They wanted to know more. They ate from the tree of knowledge, and boom, they got kicked out. But they got that knowledge though, right? So here we are right now, right? So the point is just that you know God ain't gonna tell us everything. So if there was a different civilization and they messed up and they did something to get destroyed by whatever way they were destroyed, and God was like, "Yo, I don't want nobody else to know nothing else about this. I'm gonna keep this quiet, keep this hidden from everybody." But people recorded it, and because he can't be everywhere at one time, and I know that's going to strike a lot of people. People say God can't be everywhere at one time. Well, let's not forget he had to ask Adam and Eve who told them about that they were naked, because God was walking through the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve was hiding behind the bushes, and they heard him walking and they went out there and hid behind the bushes and he was calling out, so let's not forget that story. All right, here. This is under Attacking the Messenger tab. It's the subtitle. Go back and read Joseph's words again. Did you notice his use of racial diversity, his emphasis on the European basis for humankind's great leap forward in art, and his use of the word motherland? Others did they wondered if these phrases and ideas had a familiar ring to them. A little checking revealed that Frank Joseph was really Frank Joseph Collin, a former leader of the National Socialist Party of America, who was instrumental in planning the neo-Nazi rally and march in Skokie, Illinois, that resulted in the Supreme Court's controversial decision that the party had a right to expel itself under the First Amendment, even if it meant displaying a swastika. Freedom of speech. I'm always going to say this: you have freedom. You have a freedom to do whatever you want in America. I just don't think that you have. Dang, I don't have it. I just don't think I have. I just don't think you have the free from consequences. Consequences what happened. But it's interesting that the racial part came up on here. So I was reading this book. I believe it was from 1905, and I can't remember who the author of it is. Hold on for a second. So, but most people know who Saint Germain is. This is interesting because I actually had a great discussion with an individual about Saint Germain, which can be found under my live. There's always this talk of what Saint Germain looked like. Now he's depicted as a white guy. That's what a whole bunch of people say. I've read so many different books now. I can say that I'm confident now because this is one of the books that I read that somebody actually else recommended to me to go read. And that gives him the complexion of having brown skin. I don't have it. It's on my Kindle actually. So after this show, I'm gonna take a picture of it and I'm gonna post it because that's pretty interesting. There's always an argument about what Saint Germain looked like, and I'm telling you that they say in that book, and I think it's from 1905 if I'm not mistaken, that Saint Germain had brown skin. So that's just a quick well, not a quick, but a knowledge for the day type thing. Let me write this down real quick. Let me see something, because I'm gonna go back and make a snippet of this. But anyway, I just want to say that out there that Saint Germain had a complexion of brown skin, and I'll pull that up. So the next tab, let's go to the next tab. I'm telling you, there's a lot of stuff that I'll be reading that's interesting. Okay, so this is just on a picture. It says, is it possible the Clovis people survive eventually becoming the Cherokee? So maybe I'll ask Chris that, where I know he has a book on the Kahari, and I believe I said that correctly, but it's spelled Coharie, tribe, and he might have some information on that for me. He has a great book too. I have it posted right on on my YouTube channel. So the next tab is let's see. Okay, there is a good chance the Clovis people, descendants of the Soltrian stonecrafters, influenced the newcomers from Siberia and created a new civilization we now call the Fonsum culture. Perhaps they took advantage of a chance to mix culturally or cultural history, share their stories and marriageable young people, and evolve into a new group. So that's pretty interesting. The next tab is just talking about the Younger Dryas again. So I'm not even going to harp on that. Most people already know about the Younger Dryas, so we don't even have to get onto that. But it's a hot topic. It's mentioned a lot. All right, so this is the birth. It's under the birth of religion subtitle. It's the folks that go back to Tepe had a big, obvious, motivating religion. What could it have been at this stage in human development? It apparently has something to do with animism. This is the belief that spirit animates everything in nature, that animals, trees, rocks, landscapes, and humans meet in Mother Earth's protective embrace. But it is just as obvious that astrology figured, and somehow, in other words, the very structure of Gobekli Tepe buries the earth to the sky. There are too many star, sun, and moon sight lines to ignore. Gobekli Tepe isn't an easy place to get to. The builders were motivated by what they saw and felt on the landscape, not by where they found it convenient to work. There is no nearby water source. There were no towns, villages, or fields because these hadn't been developed yet. See, now that's something that I don't agree with, and I believe I talked about that with him, um, or well, I can't remember because it was years ago, but there were no towns, villages, or fields because these hasn't been developed yet. There has been plenty of evidence of agricultural beliefs, even going 50 to 75,000 years. I've read. It just depends on what people were using or needed at that time. Different needs is why we have different types of bread, right? And people with different needs had to, at one time, if that's all they had to eat was bread, but they had some kind of digestive problem with bread, it always made them sick and break out and get rashes and stuff. And that's probably, the same people who were denied to go to church because they thought they had some type of leprosy, right? Leprosy of, sometimes something wrong with the skin. They visually checked you. And if you was eating certain types of bread that made you break out in rashes, right? No fault of your own, but something that you're just eating because that's the only thing that they say that you can, the type of bread that you can eat. Because there's only a certain type of bread that you can eat at certain times. And you didn't do it right, you got these rashes, and then you couldn't go to church and pray because they thought you had some type of leprosy. So, and I bring that up because of the simple fact that, you know, church in the building, is different than being in nature, being in nature and I guess working together at the same time because these people had obviously, motivations to do this. Then still more about Gobekli Tepe, and this is under the how and why tab. It says, or subtitle, the answer may well be suggested in the date of Gobekli Tepe's construction appears to have been built in the waning years of the Younger Dryas Ice Age epoch. Could it be that the sophisticated builders, well versed in such construction methods, arrived on this scene having witnessed a heavenly event such as a comet impact that reaped devastating havoc on Earth? If so, they might well have inspired a religion that married heaven and earth into the one theological construct. Gobekli Tepe might very well be the first temple of that new religion. I mean, that's possible, right? Somebody was sitting on top of those mountains and they seen these things come down from the sky and boom, took out so much stuff. And they was like, yo, I just took a class, on how to write. You know what I'm saying? Even though writing system they say wasn't built back then, but using some type of pictograph or memory that can, a picture of some sort that can describe it in one way. They use that. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's a lot of that's just, Gobekli Tepe is a big, big subject. A lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people are upset that certain things aren't happening as fast as they want it to be. I can be honest with you. It all has to do with money. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. I guarantee you, if somebody start throwing some money at that at that of the people that's in charge of that archaeological site. I'm not talking about, and I know there's a whole group of people. You start throwing some money in there and saying, "Hey, look, we can have this excavated in about 2 or 3 years. We're gonna throw you a couple of billion, right?" They'll be like, "Yeah, go ahead." Because a couple of billion money would make people do things, right? So I mean, it's all about money, and whoever's pockets are deeper are usually the ones who's going to be able to go back and forth the longest. I mean, it's going to get expensive for a lot of people. He says in the next tab, we've already talked some about Indonesia. In the first chapter, we saw that it's the home of the brand new discovery of a human species, Homo floresiensis, quickly dubbed the Hobbit because of its small stature. Members of this species seem to have survived for thousands of years after Neanderthal and Denisovan either became extinct or were absorbed by our species. Homo floresiensis became extinct about 12,000 years ago. Remember that date. It corresponds almost exactly to the catastrophe at the end of the Younger Dryas Ice Age. That was the event that caused rapid worldwide flooding and turned Indonesia into islands rather than a single landmass. Now, I know that they talk about Hobbit. I know in what I wrote this article, and I wanted to know who is the tallest people in the world and who are the shortest people in the world. And by scientific uh, uh, results, it's the Dinka people near Sudan, Africa. They're the tallest people on average throughout the world. And I specifically typed in the world just to see if anything. Uh, uh, and the shortest people are considered the pygmy people. Pygmy. Those are the shortest people. Matter of fact, Ta from the Egyptian gods, before he was depicted as the average sized human being, he was depicted as a pygmy individual, which is actually interesting. And then the pygmy people are also, by some people who believe this, the idea goes all the way to Godfrey Higgins. He doesn't say this specifically, but the idea goes back to him because a lot of people trace what he says, including myself. And because we have to tweak the information based on new information, the idea just switched from one place to another, and because of actual scientific data or peer review article, is that some people believe that there were a group of people who made it into Ireland that were considered pygmy individuals. And that's where they get the leprechaun from, with the gold and all that other stuff. It's actually an interesting story. I know a lot of people don't believe it, but that story does go back pretty far. It's pretty interesting too. Next tab is, obviously, if this find passes muster, it will be front page news everywhere. For those who believe in Atlantis or other civilizations, it seems too good to be true. This wouldn't have been built by the survivors of the Younger Dryas comet catastrophe. It would have been built 3,000 years before the event itself. So what is this event? Danny Hillman. I actually had a discussion with Danny Hillman. Yeah, I met him at Cosmic Summit. Yeah, he talks about the Gunung Pandang site in Indonesia. So yeah, this is about this site right here. So that's interesting that I had a podcast discussion with Jim Willis, right? He talks about Danny Hillman and I actually have a live discussion with Danny Hillman. Um, that's pretty. That's pretty cool. That's crazy because this just goes back to, you know, me being not just knowledgeable on reading the books, but I actually got to meet some of these people. Like I got to meet some of these people. I got to talk to a lot of these people. Like I have all the major players except Graham Hancock. I haven't had a discussion with Graham Hancock. I probably will never get one with Billy Carson because I disagree with him, and we both have like this. We both have uh, better attitude type. Like I'm better than you type attitude. I know I feel like I'm better than him on this Anunnaki information than he is, but I haven't had. I won't probably will never get a discussion with him because it probably won't get it. He wouldn't be able to provide the facts. He'll just be able to provide what he heard from Zachariah Sitchin. Um, and let's see who else. That's really all the major people that I haven't really talked to. I mean, I've talked to Zachariah Sitchin's friends, uh, Sasha Lesson and his wife. Um, I, t- I talked to him. We did like 10 episodes. I talked to Jeff Benner, who is a Hebrew scholar, Dr. Keith Chang, who is the founder of SLC 2485, which basically you can call the white gene. He's the founder, and I had a whole discussion on how he found it and why he found it and all this other stuff. And it's pretty interesting because he was trying to look for the cure for skin cancer. Um, I've done discussions with so many different people. It's amazing. I got Michael Donnellan, the Atlantis guy. He was just on Fox News. I'm actually editing our video now. I did a discussion with him, and I actually was able to find more because I like to watch people's videos over and over again. I actually learned more than what I thought I would have learned from anywhere else because he actually gave me some sources to go look at, and I enjoyed it, and I met him at Cosmic Summit too. So yeah. So here we go. Next tab is how do we know all this from pottery shards? That's right. The Jomon invented the world's first pottery. So these are the people that's in Japan. These are supposed to be the first people in Japan. Uh, and a lot of people talk about pottery. They were the first ones to develop pottery. It just depends on what you consider pottery. Taking mud, putting it together, and letting it dry out in the sun and using it as some type of uh, cup or dish of some sort or whatever. That can be found around the world. Plenty of people, but they go back. It says right here, but Jamon corded pottery named after the distinctive cord marks embedded in their clay pots has been excavated that unequivocally dates back to 16,500 years ago, and it is found continuously throughout the archaeological record for the next 14,000 years. So he's saying that this is why I say what you consider pottery, because this is a great example when he says named after the distinctive cord marks embedded in their clay pots. Okay, so that means somebody before that wasn't doing that, and they had uh, uh, because it didn't survive because it's made from earth and it's broken doesn't mean that it doesn't take back. But this is, we can say at bare minimum 16,500 years, right? So when somebody says what makes a civilization, was pottery part of that discussion? And if so, then now you got 16,500 years to go back. So that even then that goes before the Sumerians, which is considered the first civilization because of their writing system. The next tab is the principal. This is interesting. The principal civilization bringing God of Samaria was being called Yuan in Sumerian, often called Oannes in Greek. Yeah, you'll remember. Yeah, I think his name was Dagon or Dogon. I can't remember his name for the other one from Mesopotamia, but it's the one for ONS. You'll remember ONS from an earlier chapter when we looked at the Homo equaticus theory. Yeah, I talked about that, the Homo equaticus theory. There we learned that his whole body was like a fish and had under a fish's head another head, and also feet below, similar to those of a man, subjoined to the fish's tail. His voice too was articulate and human, and a representation of him is preserved even to this day. When the sun set, it was the custom of the being to plunge into the sea and abide all night in the deep, for he was amphibious. Ancient Babylonian texts written by a scribe named Berosus say that Oannes gave them insight into lectures and sciences and every kind of art. He taught them to construct houses, to found temples, to compile laws, and explain to them in principles of geometrical knowledge. He made them distinguish the seed of the earth, and showed them how to collect fruits. In short, he instructed them in invading, which could tend to soften matters and to humanize mankind. Oh yeah, so this is from Stephanie Daly, Myths from Mesopotamia, translated and edited by Stephanie Daly. I'm sorry, from Oxford University. I already talked about that. I already talked about Stephanie Daly a few times already. Hold on, let me see something real quick. I want to let me see. I just want to real quick. Where was it at? Just trying to make sure. Oh yeah, okay. I wanted to make sure who it was, or who was the Dagon, or I always get the names mixed up because some of these names I'm not really good with names. Yeah, okay, yeah. Hold on. Hold on. I just want to see who this is eating me up. Who it was in Mesopotamia? I know it said right here Babylonian on NS too, but it's what's the other name? Apkelu. That's what I was trying to think of. Apkelu. That's the ones that's what from the Apsu. So yeah, the Apkelu from Mesopotamia, from the Babylonians. That's what I was thinking about. But there's another one that's with a D. And I just can't remember who it was. And it's going to eat me up because I'm going to go after this and look at it. But anyway, let me go on to the next tab because it's going to eat me up. I'm going to look it up later. Watch. I'm going to find it. But so much is fairly well known, but there's a lot more in the Quran. The name for Enoch is Idris. Islamic tradition also links Idris, Enoch, with Hermes, the god of the Greek pantheon, according to the Persian philosopher Abu Mashar. Now that's interesting because that means Idris, Enoch, Hermes, Ningajita, Quetzalcoatl, and Coco Khan would all be the same too, because guess what? Hermes is Quetzalcoatl and Coco Khan and Ningajita, because the Ningajita one is the Sumerian version. So yeah, see how all those names just be piling up on top of each other. You just say, okay, if this person is this. Oh, and let's not forget, Billy Carson says that Thoth and Jesus is one and the same, right? Because I already went over that on my last episode, and that means that Enoch, Jesus, Thoth, Hermes, Idris, they would all be one in the damn. Jesus is a lot of people, ain't it? Right? But anyway, let's go. Look at these clues embedded in the funding stories of the three great monotheistic religions. For example, Moses journeys to the wilderness where he hears the voice of God coming out of a burning bush. He is told to remove his sandals because he is standing on holy ground. The voice instructs him to take a message of hope and freedom to his people. It is also reveals the name of God, I am. So God is I am. So instead of saying God, you guys should, the ones that believe in him should say I am. Yo, I am said this. I am said that. The next tab is about the Piri Reis map of 1513. It was a Turkish admiral who, because of his rank, had access to imperial library at Constantinople, one of the great centers of learning at the time. There, he compiled what is recognized as one of the oldest maps now known to text. He drew it on a gazelle skin in the year 1513 and wrote a series of notes in the margins in which he confessed that the map was a copy of a much older document now lost. His map was filed away and not seen again until its discovery in 1929. It shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and here comes the province, the northern coastline of Antarctica. Now, I just want to say this is interesting because everything that I've learned about the Piri map was that it was a composition of compiled of many maps brought into one. So basically, it's almost like putting a puzzle piece together. He was lining up everything up to make sure that that's how it's supposed to be, and that's basically what I've learned is that he's seen a piece of a map here and he's seen another one here, and he was like, wait a minute, if I take this one and put them together, oh, that might make that. So let me create my map, right? Because he created it, right? So let me put this together. And he was like, oh, look, there's another piece that can go right there, and took that other piece and took the other piece, and they moved it together. And he was like, oh, see, yeah, that's how they connect that continent to this continent by this little piece in the middle. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's probably just how it was done. Like, seriously, like, come on. I mean, it's not. It's oh my, never mind. I'm just gonna keep it. That's very simple how you can keep it. Habgood considered a few more old maps. Of course, pictures of them are available on the internet. There's the Philippi box map of 1737, which was based on a long lost source map that is undated. It pictures the entire continent of Antarctica with no ice at all, but is perfectly accurate and matched with a seismic survey done in 1958. Others include the Zeno map of 1380, the Dosa de Portolano of 1339, and an intriguing map of the north done by Claudius Ptolemy, who was a custodian of a famous Alexandrian library in Egypt before it burnt to the ground, allegedly destroyed by Christians who considered the thousands of treasures there to be pagan relics. Crazy, right? So the Christians burnt down that thing, man. Then he took a similar sized piece of paper, drew a random 51 crosses on it, and proceeded to try the experiment again. Only one straight. Okay, so what is this? And okay, so this is an experiment provided by the modern definition of ley line. A ley line is a straight line that connects at least 4 sacred sites to be positive. 5 or more is preferred. So that's what a ley line is. So boom, it goes straight to that location, whether you're going through treacherous terrain, soft sand, beautiful site, dangerous locations. Once you make it from this here to that side, then you made it. So that's pretty interesting. The fiery serpent. Myths from around the world feature the comet, the fiery serpent that changed everything so drastically 12,800 years ago. In Genesis, he is the cherubim with a flaming sword flashing back and forth. Early, we looked at the Edfu texts of Egypt. They told the story of a wandering group of people from advanced culture, or in the words of the ancient texts, ancient gods who came to Egypt bringing the gift of civilization. Theirs you will remember have been wiped out by a cosmic catastrophe. Their homeland had been suddenly eradicated, and they had considered it their obligation and quest to rebuild it on earth. One of the places they had landed was Egypt. It's interesting, right? That's what they talk about, though. Then you got in the next one. There is some evidence that later Christian writers had to deal with the same issue. They did it in the same way they dealt with other pagan rituals. They simply baptized the tradition in the most revered texts of Christendom. So that's just another interesting part that I just marked up. So the next tab is, hold on, we're coming up on it now. It may sound silly to say that an epileptic seizure marked the birth of monotheism. Monotheism. It is not necessarily that far fetched. Stranger things have happened with even greater results once the mind is expanded a little bit. So I wanted to see why. So this is under the A Vision of Unity subtitle, and it goes, and that was the last paragraph that I just read, but I'm going to read what it says. It says, Akhenaten saw somehow that God was one, and he spent the next 14 years overhauling the entire Egyptian religious establishment to express it. So this is the story about Akhenaten. Okay, first of all, Akhenaten statues all feature an elongated skull. In keeping with our study of elongated skulls back in the first chapter, that's enough to raise some interesting questions. The plot thickens when we learn that his children shared many of the physical traits, including a long neck, thick features, and what is sometimes called a feminized body, that is large breasts and hips. Okay. No, this doesn't mean he was a gay cross-dresser. It means he may have suffered from a type of temporal lobe epilepsy, which often is accompanied by those bodily features. People who suffer from this disease often report that it is triggered by exposure to bright sunlight, which brings on seizures. Okay. So Akhenaten had seizures. As reported in the September 5th, 2012 edition of This Week magazine, Hutton Ashrafian, a surgeon at Imperial College London, thinks that Tutankhamun, the famous boy king known as King Tut, son of Akhenaten, and the equally famous Nefertiti, suffer from the same disease, as did Thutmose IV, another pharaoh of the 8th dynasty. He was the one to whom the final work on the Sphinx of Giza is attributed. So this is why they're saying Akhenaten is the founder of monotheism, is because of the simple fact that he had seizures. And this is why it says it may sound silly to say that an epileptic seizure marked the birth of monotheism, but it's not necessarily that far-fetched. Stranger things have happened with even greater results once the mind is expanded a little bit. So Akhenaten saw somehow that God was one, and he spent the next 14 years overhauling the entire Egyptian religious establishment to express it. And this came about because he had seizures. Pretty interesting, right? So when people talk about, hey, Akhenaten, he's the founder of monotheism in Egypt, at least, or the founder overall, depending on what time frame you want to go off of. But Akhenaten had seizures, and that's why he started worshiping one God. That's basically what it says. So just look that up. Earlier, we said that one theory advanced about humankind's leap forward in the Great Painted Caves of Europe some 35,000 years ago. The first expression of symbolic or religious thought was the shamans ate hallucinogenic mushrooms and experienced mind-altering spiritual visions. I already talked a lot about visions already. Look up the etymology of the word vision, and you'll see that it's something in the imaginary. That's it. I'm not going to talk about that too much now. I got 2 more tabs, and that's it. Do you remember back in the early part of this chapter when we differentiate between spirituality and religion? Religion's always form around spiritual visions. It's not fair or even helpful to judge the original vision by the religion it attracts. Religions, by their true very nature, tend to distort spirituality by helping on traditions and rules. So if Akhenaten experienced a vision of oneness, of unity, of monotheism, it might be important to examine it. Okay. Let's go to the next tab. Hold on. Let me go to the next tab. This is next tab. So this is, I'm telling you, all this stuff to me is always interesting because of the simple fact that monotheism in reality, okay, in reality, whether you want to believe the facts over uh, fiction or whatever, um, he could have been created because a monotheistic or because of epilepsy. Where's that tab at? Was it this one? Okay, yeah, here we go. Dowsing. So this is under the dowsing subtitle. The Lord said to Moses, take your rod in your hand, and I will go before you to the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So he was the first dowser. So you know those people that have those sticks, the Native American guys that has the sticks, and they, you know, two of them, and it's almost like in a cross-like section. X marks the spot, basically, and they can feel some kind of energy between those dowsing rods and stuff like that. That basically is just saying that Moses was the first guy to basically do dowsing. And the last tab is entangled minds. If entangled particles interact instantly at great distances, what about the objects made up of those particles? In short, what about human brains? And one person communicate with someone else through mental power alone? Even if they are separated by great distances, do our individual brains give us instantaneous access to a universal cosmic mind? This is where they're basically talking about talking with your mind. Do I think that's possible? Absolutely. I mean, every text talks it. It just takes two people to find that. That's probably where that soulmate idea comes from. Once you have your proper soulmate, I guess, whoever it is, you can communicate from one person to that person and don't even have to say a word, and you know exactly what to do without saying a word. Everything just happens just like that with smooth sailing. So that was this book's here. Let me see what book I want to do next. So I can tell y'all I'm not going live tomorrow. I'm going to a spot tomorrow, somewhere else tomorrow. So boots on ground. But I'm probably going to start doing my time frame a little later than 10 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, let's see. The next tab or the next book I should be doing is, hold on, let me see. All right, so it should be Ancient Gods. I already did that one. All right, it's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Yeah, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Yep. So that's the next one. So that one's going to be probably a short one because I marked a lot of stuff in there, but you can't read that just for context. You have to actually read the whole thing. That's kind of a hard book to go over, but I'll probably do like a little PowerPoint presentation on that one, just so that way it's easier to follow rather than just trying to say something. But yeah, that one's next. The Egyptian Book of the Dead is next. And then we go into the writings from the ancient world, the Egyptian pyramid text. So by James P. Allen. So yep, that's it. All right. So I appreciate everybody coming in. Until next time, like I always say, knowledge is power. Y'all be easy out there and try to stay cool, or try to stay warm, I should say, because it's very cold outside right now. Right here. Y'all take it easy.